I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Rachel, and this is Neurodivergent Voices, the podcast amplifying the voices and lived experience of the neurodivergent community.
We're licensed occupational therapists who specialize in the brain and are neurodivergent ourselves. Join us every so often in this podcast that is for you and by you, the neurodivergent community.
If you're interested in learning more about neurodiversity and joining a vibrant community of neuro-inclusive adults, head to our website, divergecommunity.com.
Interested in an interview? Email divergecs@gmail.com to get it scheduled. Let's get to it.
Hello, it's so nice to meet you, Rebecca.
Hello, you too.
Hey,
I'm Rachel.
Stephanie.
Hi.
Now, just to clarify, it's 1 p.m. there, right? Tomorrow? Yeah. Okay, good.
Okay.
Good.
We were stressing out about that for quite some time.
I was stressing all day that we would come on the wrong time and mess this whole thing up, but we did it.
Yay.
That's why when I put, because I work with clients in a couple of different time zones, and so I put their time zone into my calendar and it works it out for me.
Brilliant. We should do that from now on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Less. Why are we making things harder? Just work smarter, right?
Yeah. It's like when you put the meeting into Zoom, if you put it in the time zone of the person you're meeting, and then it puts it into your calendar, and it just does it.
Okay. I love it. I also love your shirt.
Yes.
Amazing.
I like it.
Okay, what is your fidget? I think we all have a fidget. What's yours?
It's
the tangles.
Yeah. But it's broken, so it goes long instead of being like attached.
Infinite?
I quite like it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
What you got there, Steph?
Just putty.
Putty. And then we got you ever tried these, Rebecca? These nice cubes?
A client of mine has one, and I felt it yesterday, and I was like, ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Stephanie's. I had my own, but apparently I was trying to get a little bit too much proprioceptive input because I busted the thing. And so
Yours was also,
that was pretty firm, wasn't it?
yeah, I think you had a dud one.
I think it was a dud, but so I'm borrowing hers. But it's so neurodivergent OT of us to all have our own fidget, right?
Just it's
beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Meeting our needs.
Exactly. I like it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're really grateful that you are taking the time and the energy and the spoons to be with us today. And we're so excited because we feel like we are on such similar missions in different parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been really inspired by all the posts that you put out there, all of your content. So it's just very exciting to meet the person behind the content. I just picture you with your little hood up. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is
It's summer, so it's too hot for me to wear that at the moment.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us what your name is and where you are calling from.
Sure. So my name's Rebecca, and I am calling from a little place in the top of the South Island of New Zealand called Onikaka. And our home internet is super slow, so I am in my brother's caravan. So this is not my usual setting. If I could have done this from my office, I could have shown you my book collection that's behind me. So yeah, it's just we make do living rurally. Yeah.
Wow, caravan.
Yeah.
Very exciting and cool.
Yeah, I put a sheet up behind me so you can't see his piles of stuff.
It's perfect.
It works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Would you mind also providing a visual description for people who might just be listening?
Sure. I was thinking about this, and I was going to say I'm short, but you can't tell that because I'm sitting down.
But, be as tall as you want.
So I am a fair-skinned person, a little bit pink because it's quite hot here. I have short brown hair. I'm wearing blue glasses, and I'm wearing a super cool t-shirt that's a mashup of Van Gogh's Starry Night with Super Mario. So it's got power stars and Mario looking at the swirly sky.
I like it. Love it so much.
Mm-hmm.
And do your visual?
Yeah.
Introduction and description?
Yeah, Stephanie. I'm wearing my black glasses. I have my long reddish brown hair, brown at top, reddish at the bottom, because I am low maintenance. I don't maintain stuff. I've got my button-up shirt, my loose baggy jeans, my fidget in my hand. I'm also fair skinned, so yeah.
Mhm. And then Rachel, it's funny. I always used to describe myself as tan, and then I started caring about my skin health. So now I would also say I'm a fair skinned with kind of more of an olive undertone, dark brown hair. It's pulled back in the clip always because I get really easily overwhelmed by tactile input, especially near my face. So my hair's always back. I'm wearing a green hand-me-down shirt I got yesterday. And my fun, which is funny, the last time we did a podcast, we were on these two, but I just love my little color block jeans. Each leg's different color. We're both sitting cross-legged on the couch because neurodivergent. And then I have my Neato nice cube fidget as always.
Yeah, I made her switch chairs before starting. I was like, this is not comfy. We need to get it.
We had bar stools.
Oh no.
I know.
I am also sitting cross-legged on an office chair.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Incredible. That's the only way to do it. It'll switch up many times. At some point, my foot might be behind my head. We don't know.
Yeah.
But we're along for the ride. I love it. I love it.
Do you want to share kind of like a little bit about yourself and how you spend your time?
Yeah. So like I said, I live rurally. So I live on it's about an acre of land, in a little tiny house. I've been here for 3 years. I live with my husband and my dad and stepmom and 2 dogs and 12 ducks.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So we grow a lot of our own food, and none of the dwellings are connected to each other. There's like an outdoor shower. So in summer that's great. In winter it's a bit full on. But I spend a lot of time with my feet on the ground, which is really nice for me. Moved from a big city 3 years ago, and it's been beautiful to be a bit more grounded. I love board games. I run a local board games group. We do 2 events a month, and it's amazing. I read. How else do I spend my time? Watch shows and crochet and garden and bake. I make a lot of our like cleaning products and body products as well. And I'm an OT as well, you know. So that's another way I spend my time. And I'm just we'll probably talk more about it, but I'm in a bit of a transition phase where I'm leaving my employed job, which I've been doing part-time for 3 years, to go full private practice, which is pretty exciting.
It is very exciting.
That's very
not full-time private practice, just to be clear. Never full-time, but only private practice instead of a split focus.
Okay. Yes, we'll definitely dive in more deeply to that. But I feel like I do need to ask a few more questions about the ducks.
Yes.
Amazing. So are the ducks friends? Are they like, do you use them to help sustain yourselves? Like what's purpose do they serve for you?
So they're not super friendly, like we can't cuddle them, unfortunately.
Okay.
But they do lay eggs that we eat.
Okay.
And I find out it's because I react to a lot of foods. I react less to duck eggs than chicken eggs. So that's quite cool. They've got a bigger yolk and less white. And I think that's part of it. So, you know, they quack around and they eat bugs. Like we have heaps less of a slug problem in the garden. So they don't go in the gardens, otherwise they destroy stuff, but it keeps our bug populations down. And they've got a little pond that they quack around in. We had 7 and then we had ducklings. And so now we've got more, but they're big now. They're not like little cute ducklings anymore.
I love it so much. Growing up, we would go to we have this store called like Tractor Farm and Home. I think it's Tractor Supply, and there's Farm and Home's a different one, which is just like farm supplies, but they also always have baby chicks and, you know, baby ducklings, this is the right term. And as a child, I went with my mom and my brother and I wanted baby ducklings, but we lived in a really small ranch with no property. And my mom's like, okay, so I feel like they're going to call it ASPCAM or whatever. We raised ducklings in our kitchen growing up. So big fan of the ducks. I had to hear what your duck story was. They eventually moved outside, but yeah, they were good buddies.
Yeah. So we got our ducks because they used to be on a neighbor's property keeping the bugs out of his blueberries until they learnt to eat the blueberries.
Ah.
And then they were like, no. So that's how we got them in the first place.
Amazing. Amazing. You want to tell her a little bit about your animals? Because you got yourself a little homestead.
Yeah, I got a little. We have about 3 acres. 2 acres is just forest area. But when we bought this house a year and a half ago, they left a mini horse on it. So we have a mini horse, and she needed some friends. So we got some mini goats. Because of course we have to keep it like in the tiny, because we have just like, it's a tiny house and we have a tiny barn and a tiny horse. So she needs tiny goats as friends. So yeah, they just a couple, maybe 30 minutes ago, were screaming outside. I had to text my husband saying, hey, why are the goats screaming? Yeah.
They're very vocal. And every time I pull up to come visit, they greet you like, you know, I can't do the goat sound. That was bad, but
it's accurate. They're opinionated for sure.
And it's fun because you don't live in the country, really. It's just kind of like this big piece of property off of a busy road. And so you'd like walk back into this oasis and it's just tucked away. And all of a sudden you're on a farm.
Yeah. Yeah. We own, like, if I would describe all my neighbors are around us, and we own the center of the donut. So we have like a little tiny property, a little strip, like a lollipop string or stick to get to the center. And that's about it. And so we own all the forest that everyone sees. And there just happens to be a mini horse and goats in there.
Perfect. Oh, that sounds great.
Amazing. Okay. So from 2 OTs to another, how did you get into OT?
It was a bit of a roundabout journey, as many people's journeys are. So I was doing clinical psychology. I was doing a clin psych PhD and thought that that's what I wanted to do. And I got really burnt out. So looking back now, it was 100% autistic burnout, but I didn't know I was autistic. And I developed chronic fatigue syndrome. I got something viral, developed chronic fatigue syndrome, went downhill really fast over a 6-month period, and got to a point I needed to take a leave of absence, and I never went back to it. I couldn't, my work capacity had dropped to about 2 hours a week, and I just couldn't go back into that setting. I didn't have the capacity to. And so I did a couple of like certificate level courses. I did education support, and then I did a disability certificate. I worked in a special school and like after school care programs for kids with disabilities. And yeah, and then I talked to a friend of mine who just finished her OT masters, and something like a light bulb went off. And I wish I could remember the title of the first book that I read about OT that she lent me. All I remember is that it had like a black and white cover and was about like occupational justice. And it just lit a fire in me. And because I already had my undergrad honors in psych, I could do, and I was in Australia and they have a graduate master's program. So you don't have to do another bachelor's degree. You can qualify in 2 years, which is awesome. So I applied for a couple of those programs. We moved to Melbourne and I started the master's program, and it was pretty challenging. I managed the first year full time and then had to drop to part-time for the second year. So I did the second year over 2 years. Faced a little bit of difficulty getting some accommodations in my program, which is unfortunately really common. And so this was around chronic fatigue. I developed fibromyalgia in the meantime as well. Whole bunch of digestive stuff going on. I managed to get through the program. And I graduated 2019, and then I started my first job as an OT in 2020 as Melbourne went into lockdown.
Yeah. We're in the exact same time frame as you. That's 2019. Funny.
Yeah. So that was really challenging. And me and my partner were really struggling in Melbourne. And so at the end of that year, we moved. I'd always wanted to come back to New Zealand. It's where I was born. It's where I grew up. And so, yeah, just being so isolated during the lockdowns just brought our plans a bit further forward. And so been back in New Zealand for 3 years now. And I've been working in a pretty non-traditional space. So not technically an OT job, but you can't turn it off. I've been working in a residential dialectical behavior therapy program. So working with people with trauma histories, borderline personality disorder. I have feelings about that diagnosis, but
Yeah.
fair. Yeah. So yeah, emotional dysregulation, high suicidality, self-harm. And yeah, it's been amazing training, amazing learning. And I haven't been able to be an OT in that setting, not properly. I've had to, tune bits of me down, which doesn't fit well with how I want to be as a person. And so yeah, a year ago, just over a year ago, I started up my private practice. And I can talk more about kind of what that is. But yeah, so for the last year, I've been doing both. And that's been pretty challenging energy-wise because my work capacity is still only about 15 hours a week, and I've been doing more like 25. So it's been a lot. And, the more I did my own OT stuff in my own way, I was like, right, I can do a half day of OT and not feel exhausted. I can do a half day at my other job and need to collapse when I get home. And it became clearer and clearer that I needed to make a change, and make a change that was going to support my well-being and wanting to focus on ways that I can support people in a way that's authentic and meaningful, and that, that I can make a difference without having to squash parts of who I am.
That's so beautiful. It really is living so authentically with the kind of lifestyle that you're, I assume, trying to help your clients find, right? You really truly are practicing what you preach and accommodating, listening to your body and showing yourself grace. And I wish everyone could get to the place in which they could work and live in line with their capacity. I don't know what the culture in New Zealand is compared to the United States, but we are so stuck in this hustle grind culture that if you can't do 40-hour work, 60, 80-hour work weeks, right? Then you are not a productive member of society. And I struggled with that a lot as someone coming out of burnout and transitioning to working for myself and realizing I don't have a 40-hour capacity. I don't think I ever will. And that's okay. And I can still be productive. I can still contribute, but I had to, and I'm still unlearning a lot of those capitalistic narratives that have been so deeply ingrained.
Yeah, and it's a lot to unlearn. So, because I'm kind of like 10 years deep into chronic illness, so I've been doing a lot of that, and it's kind of, just the last few years. And I think with, learning that I am autistic ADHD, that has brought this whole other layer of understanding and self-compassion, and I'm not broken, I'm not wrong. I need different things, and that's okay. And so, if my work capacity is 15 to 20 hours a week, well, I've changed my lifestyle so that it's more affordable. I don't live in a big city. Our living costs are really low. We grow a lot of our own food, and so both me and my partner can have been able to reduce our hours and kind of, live in a values aligned way that supports my needs, and we're very lucky to be able to do that. I know that a lot of people can't, and the things aren't there, and very lucky to be in this position where I was able to make that decision, and that there was some land that my parents had that we could be on, and share and work alongside them, because I'm usually in that not quite sick enough position for like financial support from the government. It's always been that difficult thing, but by reducing the living costs, I then don't have to push and work as much. And that's something, so my word of the year this year is authenticity. And so that entirely like in the way I market myself, and I put quotes around marketing because my marketing is not what people say marketing should be. Just like, yeah, how do I want to show up and be who I am, and like and connect with the people who will support that and who want that as well, right? Like I don't have to pretend to be somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Something you just said is just like spinning in my head, that idea of not being not quite sick enough. And I think that's that, and I like that it was in air quotes, because that is something that folks that have these non-visible or invisible disabilities struggle with so much, right? We struggle with internally, like with our internalized ableism, but also in getting supports and resources, right? Because how can people who can't feel what is going on within you and who can't discreetly measure it and be able to track it, how can they know it's real, right? And so that makes us oftentimes question ourselves and gaslight ourselves out of the support and care that we need. So because chances are you probably are sick enough, right? But they don't have the tools to be able to measure that and appreciate that. And that's hard to wrap our minds around and give ourselves the kind of grace we deserve when these are real things, right? These are real struggle. So
yeah,
I just had to add that on there because I was like, yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a big thing, and it's talked a lot about in chronic illness. I think it's talked less about with neurodivergence as well. And it's not necessarily that we're sick. Again, I'm using air quotes.
Yeah.
It's that we live in a world that's not set up to support people who are sensitive, who have sensory sensitivities, who need to rest after socializing, even if it's fun. That fun things are also a drain. Or we can use the spoon theory, and there's limited spoons. So I think it's being talked about more in that neurodivergence space than it, well, and also the big crossover of chronic illness and neurodivergence is massive.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That overlap.
But yeah,
it's almost one. Yeah.
Is the Venn diagram a circle? Is it?
Yeah, exactly. How much are we just becoming a circle? Yeah.
Right. These aren't just coincidences. I mean, there's a lot of research making real biochemical, physiological connections between all of these things. So I feel like it's just a matter of time until they get the respect that they deserve and the treatment that they deserve, but
yeah. I mean, I don't know how far New Zealand is with that. I know the US has quite a way, because even with like, we're talking about, again, quote unquote, invisible disabilities and stuff, even though we can kind of see it, like fatigue symptoms type happening, even for visible disabilities like cerebral palsy and stuff, how sometimes the government still prevents some type of accommodations and seizures and stuff, and you still have to kind of go through hoops to kind of prove that you're disabled, even though you've been disabled your entire life. Like, for instance, my sister has cerebral palsy and epilepsy and a bunch of other things, and I think she's tried to get government assistance 4 times now. She's like, you literally have brain scans that I have half of a brain. I don't understand why this is an issue. And it's just an extra fight for people that don't even have that actual like data, quote unquote, that they're looking for.
Yeah. So when I was training in Australia, they were bringing in this National Disability Insurance Scheme. That's right. And there's so many barriers for people even to get onto that. And the definition of permanence, like it's very difficult for people with, ME/CFS, myalgic encephalomyelitis / chronic fatigue syndrome to get onto something like the NDIS because they don't see it as a permanent condition. And there's so many barriers. And, for people who don't have supports and don't have difficulties with executive functioning, like it's a real drain. Like people don't try for it because of how much stress it would be. And And I'm still learning the systems here because I was away in Australia for 15 years. So I'm
Wow.
kind of back and relearning, because I left New Zealand when I was 18, and now I'm back. And so I'm learning a bunch of the systems because I didn't know what they were. So like there's a little bit of support. I get like a disability supplement to help cover some counseling and a couple of like physio and things like that. But there's not a lot. And I've been finding that because mostly I work with private pay people, because then I don't have to spend all their funding money justifying what we're doing.
I know. Mm-hmm.
And writing the reports and going, yes, they need this, or yes, they need more. And, we can just work together and spend the time. And as long as they're happy and we're doing what's kind of working, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
And I don't have to justify it to an external third party. I know that I'm working in an occupational therapy based way and a evidence-based and a theory-driven way, even if I don't always explicitly talk about that with clients. I know that I'm kind of doing my thing in my head. And then if they can see that it's having a benefit, which if it wasn't, they wouldn't be spending their money, then that's all that matters. And it's just so much more straightforward and less stressful than having to jump through the hoops.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
been our biggest thing here specifically. And as much as we want to help those that like can't necessarily afford private pay, as much as like we want to help, because even we've talked about this, we probably couldn't afford our own services, which is, it's just the matter of fact of the world economy at the moment and whatnot. But it really is
are very fairly priced services.
I
should say that.
They are fairly priced services. They're very fairly priced services. But at the end of the day, we don't want to have to justify to insurance companies. Mind you, we're still having to justify what occupational therapy is and why our treatment was doing a certain way. And oftentimes it's by people that don't understand what OT is and don't understand neurodivergence. And it's, like you said, jumping through hoops that are this big, they're super narrow. So it's just, I don't want to say a losing battle, but when you are neurodivergent therapist yourself, you only have so much energy to expel at the end of the day. Like I don't want to spend hours upon hours justifying with my notes and stuff. I already spend hours during the evaluation process alone to try to give the best care for my clients. And if they want those notes, that's fine. I'll gladly give it to my clients, but I'm not trying to justify it to a third party.
And the trouble with the justification, right, is systemic. It's more what's going on with our medical system and what is reimbursable, right? Because to be able to justify these things would require our society and systems to care about mental health, quality of life, and preventative care. And like that's not what's reimbursable or fundable right now. So we have to somehow find a way to connect this to a physical, measurable impairment, right? Which is so limiting, so limiting.
And it's so short-sighted as well. I think early on when I was making graphics, I did one of the the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, and why aren't we building fences to prevent that? It's like, it's so short-sighted. Like, you save money in the long run by having preventive services. That's been proven over and over again. And yet, we've had problems in our mental health system here as well, where it's so crisis driven and people have to escalate to get services. And, if we could provide the services early, people wouldn't have to be in that level of distress to then go into a system which often isn't set up to even support the big systemic things that are going on. And it's just, and also like the other thing that comes up for me with that is who's making the decisions about what's reimbursable. They aren't clinicians generally. And so how is that then even, well, it's not a fair system.
No.
But like, even if you justify things, and this is happening in Australia as well. Like, you can have all of the justification and they can still say no.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really frustrating space to be in. And I try and do a bit of sliding scale stuff, and I'm looking at being able to, I'm trying to get like little bits of funding here and there so I can offer some groups at like a really discounted rate so that people can come and do them. But trying to balance whether like, I still need to make a little bit of money, but also how do I make it possible for people to get some supports?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Would you, we've kind of like talked all around your private practice, but would you mind sharing more about kind of what your mission is and the kinds of services you provide through that?
Yeah, so because in the questions you sent, it was kind of like, what's your elevator pitch for what you do?
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's supporting. So originally it was kind of from this intersection of chronic illness and mental health. And so this was before I was diagnosed autistic ADHD. So that complex intersection of chronic illness and mental health, and how to do the things people want to do and live have joy and have meaning in your life, even when there's difficulties in it. And then I was finding a lot of self-referred neurodivergent clients. There must have been something in my messaging. So now in my messaging, because I have got these diagnoses. I do self-identify as I do identify as neurodivergent now, but even before that, there was.
Yes.
So then, yeah, so I'm working now at this complex intersection of chronic illness, neurodivergence, and mental health being under the broader neurodivergence umbrella, but also being a separate thing. So a lot of the people that I'm working with are at this complex intersection of all three. And, they might have found other providers that can look at one of those things, but not people that have an understanding of all three. A lot of the advice for ADHD is very difficult to implement if you've got a fatigue condition. And so, yeah, and it's unique for every person, because somebody might be wanting to look at work and how they can manage at work. For other people, it's like, how do I get out of the house a bit more? There's this whole range that I'm kind of working with, and it's still like I've only been doing a half day a week so far. And as I wrap up at my employed role, I'll be expanding that to another half day. Nice. And what I want to do more of, so at the moment, it's largely been just one-on-one stuff. I do a little bit of mentoring as well. So I really love, and I am wanting to train as an actual supervisor, because I love working with, people who are learning and wanting to be OTs or other professions. I mentor a support worker, because support workers don't get supervision, and I really think they should. And I've talked to, just like informally, to students who are like, hey, I'm wondering about OT, what do you reckon? Or, I love that kind of stuff. And so I'm hoping that this year I can create a bit more brain space to be able to do a bit more of that, and to run trainings for, to upskill people in neurodiversity affirming mental health care. And how could sensory processing show up in your therapy room, and what could you do about it, and things like that. So it was cool. I got the opportunity at work at the end of last year to run. So I did sort of like a 6-week build your crisis survival kit, going through different skills and culminating with building a kit. And then I also got to do a little neurodiversity. So I looked at like communication and executive functioning and learning styles and a few other things. So I want to turn those into things that I can offer to my local community and online, to just, I guess, to send those ripples out wider. Because I love the one-on-one work. I really do. And I want to keep doing it, but I'm also wanting to balance that with, with my finite energy capacity, I can only reach so many people one-on-one. Whereas if I can train people and, put content out and do my worksheets and my blogs and all of that those ripples get bigger, and then those people send out their own ripples, and that can create bigger change, which is really what I'm really passionate about. So yeah, I also do write blogs, and I realized I hadn't ever done like making graphics and worksheets. I started doing that about a year ago, and that's just been so much fun.
Yeah,
so
right.
that's a bit of passive income for me, having the worksheets up on the website, and running the Facebook page, which has got much bigger than I thought it was going to very quickly. So that's,
you got over 6,000 followers.
Yeah.
Holy.
Yeah. I'm like, holy what?
Well, you put out really valuable resources, so people want that,
Yeah. So I'm really I'm really aware of the responsibility of that, and choosing what I do share and what I post. I've been having a bit of a block with that this last month, because there's some stuff going on at work that's been really stressful, that's not actually connected to me leaving. So yeah, I haven't kind of had the brain space to be putting a lot out there. So I'm hoping that when that stress level reduces, that I do have more brain space to be putting more of my own stuff out there again, because I've got a Trello board full of ideas of things that I want to create and put out there. And I don't set myself a posting schedule, or I'm going to release a new resource every week, because no, that's
you wouldn't do it. Yeah. Right.
So I post when I can, and when there is something that I want to post, and otherwise it's a lot of sharing and amplifying other voices. And I'm trying as best I can to to share like non-speaking voices and people of color, and smaller pages, just to try and use the platform that I do have to spread other voices out into the ether that is the weird ether that is Facebook.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's a long-winded answer of what I do.
It's an amazing answer though, because it's showing how much like you are monitoring your own self and wanting to do the best at your capacity to be able to impact as many people as possible. Like you talked about the ripple effect, like the butterfly effect that occurs, how you're purposely being mindful with how you're spending your time, and you're very OT of you, and how you want to spend your time with your practice, and how you want to interact with other individuals to see this ripple effect to grow better services for an infinite amount of people.
Yeah. And for me to be able to continue doing this, I have to do it in a sustainable way. I've hit, I'm probably in a bit of a, like, not as bad of a burnout as I had 10 years ago, but it's, definitely in a level of burnout right now. And so, yeah, for me to be able to continue doing what I love, because I do love it so much. Like, I really believe in, the base theory of occupational therapy, and that base at its core is supporting people to do the things they want and need to do in the way that they can. Like, it's so creative and it's so person-centered. And I think that's why it doesn't fit well inside systems, because it is so individual. And I forgot where I was going with that point, but anyway, just like, continuing to do what I want to do is in that theme of authenticity this year, is that's part of that. Like, I can't tell people to do things and then completely railroad my own needs. Right? It's like, when we were emailing, my email signature says,
yes, we talked about it.
I work part-time to support my needs, and I might not get back to you for 5 to 7 days. Like, that's
yes, that is goals.
We
immediately implementing.
We read that, we're like, we need to do that. Why don't we do that? That's an amazing.
It's so beautiful. And you know what? It's a ripple effect there too, right? That is a courageous act that allows others to reflect on their own need and feel like it's okay for them to address that too. So
Yep.
all of these, yeah, all of
Yep.
these natural ways that you are
Mhm.
making a difference in your presence and what you choose to share with this world, you know?
Yeah.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that's been really key for me. I think I've had periods where I've like tried to force change on people, and it's like that
Mhm.
never works. But if I can model by, and I've got ripples just at home in the last 3 years with my family being able to see more about my day-to-day reality and all the things I do day to day to keep myself ticking along,
Mhm.
you know, that then ripples out. And so by gently modeling, and then people can take on what's relevant for them.
Mhm.
I feel like that's a much more sustainable way to make change than being right up in people's faces and going this, because that doesn't work. People, especially if they've got a PDA nervous system, they're going to be like,
Yeah.
Shut them down. Yeah,
Mhm.
but
absolutely.
if I can offer and go, hey, I find this really useful. I'm not telling people what they're going to find
Mm,
useful.
Mhm.
And I do, with my practice being from that lived experience space, I do use a lot of my own story and experience in sessions, that therapeutic use of self in a boundaried way, of
yeah,
course.
yeah.
But
Mhm.
that's why people come to see me,
Mhm.
because they want that shared lived experience. They
Mhm.
want that understanding. They don't want somebody who goes, oh, but you don't look sick, or it's
Mhm.
all in your head, or have you just tried yoga? They don't want
Love
somebody
energy.
who's gonna, invalidate a very real lived experience. And yeah, so if I can model how I show up, like I'm even thinking about taking my phone number completely off my website because I don't like phone calls. I'm like,
Mhm.
please contact me via email, you know?
Mhm.
Mhm.
So just things like that, how I can show up and how I write about things and what I put out and what I share, and being, yeah, trying to find the balance between authenticity and oversharing as well is sometimes,
Yeah.
it's a tricky one to walk.
Mhm.
But also I think it's, like, yes, I'm an occupational therapist, but I'm also a person. And, I don't like actually I had a conversation with a client about this the other week. I don't like that whole professional, I'm using air quotes again, that professionalism, and that, like, that we need to, obviously we need to be ethical and keep boundaries, but you can do that without creating a wall
Mhm.
Mhm.
between you and the person, right? Is that we can be people together
Mhm.
and create that connection. And I can still be a professional, and I can still have my knowledge, and I can still, have my expertise. But that doesn't mean I need to pretend to be something I'm not, or wear clothes I'm not comfortable in, or, you
Yeah.
know, be, I don't know, I'm like kind of like sitting up straight and being all like uptighty.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I can be a person, I can sit on the floor with a client,
Mhm.
just whatever it is, and showing up in a way that's supportive and validating and real. And I don't have it all together all the time, and
Mhm.
that's okay.
Mhm.
There's so yeah, I really care about that too, is actually being in a boundary and ethical way, but
Mhm.
being a real person in my therapeutic work with people. Because I think, what is it, like 80% of the benefit of therapeutic work is that relationship.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what a beautiful thing that we get to have a career that allows us to be ourselves. And that in of itself is actually therapeutic. And that in of itself is actually helping foster change. Like, what a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Man.
so I'm so glad that I didn't go through with clinical psych. Like, I have huge respect for clin psychs. They do amazing work. But I feel like that would have been too much of a box for me.
Mm,
Whereas with occupational therapy, there's more scope, there's more space, there's more creativity. I don't know, there's lots of words in there.
yeah.
But yeah, there's that real, it feels very responsive. Like
Mhm.
I can kind of pull on things from a whole bunch of different places, and it's still occupational therapy, because occupation is at the center.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. Thank you so much for sharing. We want to learn just a little bit more about you and what some of your strengths are, and also what are some spoon drainers for you as a person.
Yep. So maybe I'll do spoon drainers first. I don't
Okay.
know. So having to mask is
Yeah.
a huge spoon drainer. So being in a a space that is trying to be neurodiversity affirming but isn't quite there, and there's a lot
Yeah.
of kind of having to explain and not being able to be super authentic.
Yeah.
Group settings. So, and that kind of does depend on the group setting, because like my board game group, amazing, love it, but it's still a spoon drainer, even though it's something that I enjoy.
Yeah.
So anywhere that's kind of busy and noisy, where there's multiple sources of noise, especially, super draining. Split focus, split attention, too many things to do, and struggling to prioritize, huge spoon drainers. Yeah, I mean that there's lots of things, living a life in a
Yeah.
neurotypical capitalist society, massive spoon drainer.
Yeah.
So things, I think, definitely a strength, and I struggle with this because I am learning to speak out about the things that I am good at without having shame about doing that and feeling like, oh, I don't have the right to do that. So it's harder.
Yeah.
But strengths, I think this whole kind of path I'm on. So last year my word of the year was connection, and this year it's authenticity, which feels like a continuation of that pathway. And I think that self-knowledge and getting more comfortable to speak my truth and speak up for my needs and advocate for others as well, those are real strengths. The self-knowledge can sometimes go into a like spoon drainer, because sometimes there's too much awareness. And certain kinds of psychological therapies are then not useful, because I don't need to analyze myself some more. I need to feel.
Yeah.
So I think another strength is like, I could desire to always be learning and growing, and my brain keeps trying to tell me the negatives of each one of these, so I'm just going to try and stick with
Good
it.
noticing though. Yes.
Yeah, just that desire to always be learning and not be stagnant and have things to look forward to. And when I do, so I do quite a lot of values work with clients, and it's one of the workshops that I've delivered a few times. I'm working on having an online version. Hopefully at some point I'm getting there. But usually what sits at the top of my pyramid is making a difference. And so, and that, and values being a guiding light rather than a thing that you achieve, right? Values are different to goals. So being able to be creative and flexible in how I get there, and, making a difference can be making a difference to myself and making a difference in my own relationships, and then how that spreads out. I can make a difference in my dog's life by giving her a cuddle or taking her for a swim. Making a difference can be, it doesn't have to be big society changing stuff, right? Making a difference can be pausing and taking a rest. So I kind of, sometimes we try and do values-based stuff or set goals that are just too massive, and then they become intimidating and not helpful. And so I'm really all about, and this is again very OT, is breaking that stuff down. So authenticity, well, that's massive, and I'm not going to be there all the time, but how can I, in little things, how can I show up authentically? Whether that's kind of, like my email signature and being like, no, I won't get back to you straight away. Or, coming on a podcast and fidgeting openly is still, that's still pretty new for me. But just, how can I show up and I guess send people the message that they're okay in whatever spaces I'm holding, that they can be okay to be who they are as well.
I love that.
Yeah.
That is always the hardest question, for folks to answer. And that's why we always keep it in. It's so important that we strive to help the folks we work with see and live into those strengths, right? And I think we have to, in that way, practice what we preach too.
Yeah. You've mentioned it a couple times already throughout a newer diagnosis, right, of autism and ADHD and stuff. Do you mind kind of like going deeper into your own self exploration of being neurodivergent?
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to, because it's been and I'm still not at the space. I really want to write an actual blog post where I do detail it out. So maybe this is a good start to get that kind of processing. So, a lot of it's fairly typical, kind of like anxiety, depression through teens that was, treatment resistant through the 20s and all of that. I am also diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Whether or not that still fits in light of autism, who knows? That hasn't actually been reassessed. It's not that I don't agree with it. Some of it does fit, but I have problems with the whole calling someone's personality disordered when what they're experiencing is a trauma response. So, so anyway, so
absolutely.
At the time though, so that was when I was about 28. At the time, that really fitted for me, and it made a lot of things make sense, and it made it possible for me to do some really interesting therapy that went down into where some of my triggers, I guess, were coming from. Like, for example, my husband being in the next room playing a game with his headphones on and not being able to hear me, and I would have a complete meltdown. And by unpacking that, it was flicking an abandonment switch that I didn't have any space to be able to respond. I was just having a complete reaction that was old, And so at the time, it was super helpful, super validating, and it was really helpful. But then as I kind of got older, it was kind of like, is that it? And I've had doctors try and say, is it bipolar? When I was like, I don't have long enough periods of, and it was more a premenstrual hormonal thing anyway. So lots of different things. And so then it was kind of this domino effect of various female friends being diagnosed autistic ADHD, which is fairly common as well. And just talking more to them and about their experiences and going, hey, well, I'm a lot like you and we get along. I wonder, just starting to wonder. And also, so my mum got a late diagnosis as well, like in her late 40s. And then my sister in her like mid-teens as well. So not like late, but not a child, a child diagnosis. And there's various other undiagnosed neurodivergence, probably a lot of ADHD as well, in the family, which is, becoming a bit more obvious now that I know more about it. And so I always thought that I probably wasn't ADHD because it, the stereotypical boys bouncing off the walls thing didn't fit. And of course, now that I know more about it, my hyperactivity is all internal. Never stops. So yeah, just that kind of process and talking to different friends and different friends kind of talking about their experiences and not being at all pushy, but just they were kind of like, do you wonder? And then reading some books. Unmasking Autism by Dr. Devon Price was a real game changer for me.
It's good book.
So that was one of the ones that kind of made me go, oh, okay, maybe. But then, the process to autism diagnosis is, in some ways, the ADHD diagnosis pathway is easier. And I didn't even bother going public because I knew that I'd probably sit in that not sick enough to be even referred, not impacted enough. So, found a local clinic and I asked for an ADHD assessment and asked them to screen for autism as well. And the diagnosis came back as both.
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised, like, again, I've still was struggling to not accept the ADHD diagnosis, because it wasn't that I didn't think it fitted. It was more the impostery stuff around it. And learning, because I've diagnosed ADHD inattentive, because that's how it presents. But the more I kind of, you know, unlearn and unmask, and I do need to fidget, and, you know, but often that was in socially acceptable ways, like taking copious notes.
Oh,
That's actually how I fidget in classes and in meetings, right? Is by taking notes, or picking my fingernails, or, you know, like playing, you know, those kind of socially acceptable things. And, you know, my brain never shuts up. Like there's songs and there's things, and it's just, you know, it's constant. And so that was the end of, no, it's January now, so it's not last year, the year before. So the end of 2022.
Okay.
So those two diagnoses came through, and I was like, right, okay. And I feel like I'm still in a bit of a medication trial. I think we've found something, but it's not quite right, but I'm not quite sure even where to go with it, and neither's my GP or the psychiatrist. So I'm kind of just going with good enough for right now. But I think what's been the biggest thing is that space for self-compassion and understanding how my brain works and why things are so tiring. And I just got distracted by the color coding of your books for a second. Looking at that behind you. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Love it.
You got a lot to look at.
Sorry, yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah. Oh, if I was in my usual office, there would be a lot behind me as well. Just, yeah, that space to, and it kind of, and this is another, I've been working on this graphic series that has really stalled, but the cycles of grief from a diagnosis, you know, grief around not having known this earlier about myself, and how things could have been different, grief about now and who I am, and re-exploring identity, and but also that, like, it's kind of like a grief. It's kind of like goes through phases of like non-acceptance. Is this even true, with a lot of self-gaslighting?
Yeah.
And into grief of misunderstanding, and grief for everyone who's neurodivergent and late diagnosed, well, not just late diagnosed, but that, you know, it's a different experience. Grief for women who've been over medicated and told that it was these other things, and actually it's, you know, if somebody comes to me and goes, oh, I've got treatment resistant depression and anxiety since I was a teenager, I'm like, is it though? Is it actually? So just this whole, like, yeah, like grief for myself, but also grief for the wider world and society and the way it treats people whose brains are different. And then, yeah, that non-acceptance, gaslighting, self-gaslighting space, and then back into acceptance and into that self-compassion space. And those cycles are less extreme now. And, you know, I'm just over a year kind of that diagnosed, identified, whatever words I say diagnosed, because that was my process, but also self-identification is completely valid. I had savings and I could afford a private pathway, and I know a lot of people can't do that. And I say that to people who work with me. It's like, it doesn't actually make a difference to me whether you've got a diagnosis or not, because we will work on the symptom and the impact. So I don't need to have a formal diagnosis of ADHD. We can look at executive functioning without having a formal diagnosis. We can look at sensory processing without having a formal diagnosis. So, you know, because as an OT, we can't diagnose. We can suggest that people might want to follow a pathway if they wanted to do that. But really, we're looking at the impact on the function and what we can do to support people with what's difficult, you know. And so, yeah, it's been just, yeah, such an interesting process of growth and learning and self-development, and really immersing myself in learning, mostly lived experience. Like, I have not done a lot of literature searching
Mm-hmm.
on neurodivergence because I know a lot of it is really ableist and dangerous in a lot of ways, because the
Mhm.
evidence base has not caught up with the whole
Yeah.
neurodiversity affirming movement. It's getting there. Bits of it is getting there, and there are people doing some amazing things. Like, I attended a webinar by Reframing Autism last week on like autism research and what to look out for if you're going to participate in autism research, and these pathways for autistic researchers to be creating the studies as well. So things are moving, but it's slow. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of my reading, I do on my website, I've got a reading list of all the books I read last year. And I'm going to do another one for this year. So that continual, like, seeking not answers, but just more information.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not looking to fix myself. I'm not looking to fix my clients. I'm
Yeah.
looking
Yeah.
at how I can support
Mhm.
my needs and their needs
Mm-hmm.
in a way that's going to work for whoever it is that I'm working with. So just that, and I look a lot at trauma-informed stuff as well, because I think to be neurodiversity affirming, you have to be trauma-informed as well.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have one without the other. I love, like, polyvagal nervous system regulation stuff as well, sensory processing, interoception, meaningful activity, like all
Mm-hmm.
of this, all of this stuff for myself as well as the people I work with. And it's just been such, connecting with um, other occupational therapists who are neurodivergent. Like, it's amazing seeing those Facebook groups pop up where it's
Yeah.
for neurodivergent occupational therapists is really cool. One of the projects that I'd love to get off the ground is creating a peer support group for neurodivergent and
Mhm.
chronically ill occupational therapists, because there's a lot of us out there who are
Mm-hmm.
not sure how to still be an OT
Mm-hmm.
because the systems aren't, because working in the systems doesn't work if you're chronically ill and or neurodivergent. So that's another kind of like passion area of mine that I'm hoping I have space to get off the ground this year, because I think that it's so important to be able to connect with other professionals who think and feel the same way. And often that's not in your local area. Like, you guys are so lucky that you've got the two of you right there.
Yeah.
I know we are. We really
But
are.
so often, like, I live rurally, like, I think my area is, maybe it's only 5,000 people. Like, it's a little place. Like, there
Yeah.
aren't other occupational therapists. There's
Mhm.
like, I think there's one,
Mm-hmm.
so being able to create that community. And I think that's another really important thing in the last year, is finding validation.
Yeah.
And oh my God, other people do that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Just finding, yeah, all that kind of affirming stuff. It's like, all right, I'm not broken.
Hmm.
Sometimes it feels like I'm broken, when I'm having a hard day and everything hurts and I can't move, like, but also it's like, and learning more about, so I also saw Ehlers-Danlos syndrome diagnosis last year because I got hypermobility stuff going on, and I don't quite meet the EDS criteria, kind of in that generalized hypermobility, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known about that if I hadn't been connected in with the neurodivergent community online because of this
Yeah.
overlap. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
hypermobility with autistic people. So it's just been, yeah, it's been such an amazing, like, hard journey as well, and talking to family and figuring out how open to be about it at work,
Mhm.
and then being more authentic online and in, that those professional spaces, and how to navigate that as well. I presented at my first conference last year. That was awesome. And just met some other really cool neurodivergent OTs as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so amazing to have that connection. And I don't love public speaking, but if I'm talking about something I really care about, I
Yeah.
actually like
They
public
just info
speaking.
dump it. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
So that connection and that community building has been so key. And another cool project I'm part of is Autistic Revolution, which is an autistic-led created online magazine. The second issue is coming out, I think we're aiming for February. So, being part of that and that whole group of people, and just having those spaces and still feeling a bit impostery at times, like being a page guide for one of those sections. I'm like, am I even autistic enough? But whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, being so welcomed into these spaces as well. It's so different, the not like still sometimes feeling on the edges because that's my normal, but also like there's a lot of shared experience that really changes that dynamic.
Absolutely. To feel validated that you are not alone in your experience is huge. Huge. And so grateful for these communities for bringing us together. I mean, here we are literally on opposite sides of the world. And it's incredible how much overlap I'm hearing in your story with my own. And I know with Stephanie's too. And how beautiful is that we get to experience that with you and also be validated in that way too. And so for that, I'm very grateful for the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that I'm really excited to see what graphic or resource you come up with for this. No pressure. This is not, now I feel like I've set up a demand for you, but with the grief cycle, because that is so real. And it's something that, I'm like 6 months to a year into that myself. And what you said about like, I'm still having those cycles, they're just less often now, or they're like more, less frequent. I feel that same way. And something that has been particularly challenging for me is communicating this identity and diagnosis to other folks, especially when they don't have an understanding, a neurodiversity affirming understanding of what that can look like and how unintentionally like gaslighting the responses can be. And so that feeling of being an imposter is amplified every time you share that with someone who doesn't understand, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I like, unfortunately, I've got a lot of that from having had 10 years of chronic illness, because there's a lot of gaslighting in that space, lots of, oh, but you don't look sick, or people telling me I look really great, and I'm like, I feel like shit inside, and so coming into this, this new understanding, and I've been really choosy about who I tell directly, and then people might hear it roundabout, but I don't necessarily have to have had that direct conversation. Like even in my workplace, it took me a while. So I told like a couple of colleagues who I knew would be affirming. I ended up telling my manager because I was really struggling with a bunch of stuff, and that was part of it, with that new understanding. But it was really hard to be, and this is in a mental health setting, right? As well. It was really hard to be really open and honest about it. And even because I had the BPD diagnosis as well when I started there, that was kind of my understanding of what was going on. And I did talk about that in my interview, but I wasn't open about that with the team because some of the ways there was some judgmental language going on, and I've been working really hard over the last 3 years to change people's language and the way they talk about people, and like they're getting there, but organizations move really slowly, and this is why I want to run neurodiversity affirming mental health trainings in my local community, because there's a lot of learning that people need to do, and if you tell a friend or a colleague or a therapist and they go, oh, but you don't seem autistic. It's like,
Yeah.
well, if you like,
Mhm.
being able to accept people's exploration, self-identification, diagnosis, and their experience without going, oh, but doesn't seem like it to me. Well, you see this much. I'm holding my fingers up about an inch apart from each other.
Mhm.
You see a tiny glimpse into somebody's life. Like as a therapist as well, you sometimes see people at their best as well as at their worst,
Mhm.
but sometimes they're doing their best to be there and get the most out of a session, and so they won't see all the things, or they won't see the consequences of doing something. I was talking with my grandma about this last week. It's like, I don't talk about being in pain
Mhm.
because I'm in pain all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to talk about that all the time because I don't want to focus on it. Is part of it. I don't want all of my focus to be on that, because that in itself can make it seem worse. I don't want to
Mhm.
ignore it either, but it's finding that balance. But just because people don't express something or talk about something doesn't mean it's not true or real for them.
Mhm.
Like somebody might come to a therapy session and then have to have a nap, but
Mhm.
you won't see that unless somebody tells you that that's what's happening, right? And then you don't know to change your practice. If somebody's needing to do that after a session, or have they been heavily masking
Mhm.
during your session? Do they need a shorter session? Do they need a break? Do they need sensory supports, fidgets? Do they
Mhm.
need the lights off? Do they need, I ask my counselor to turn off her little fan when I'm in there, even if it's hot, because the buzzing is too loud for me. And she
Mhm.
knows to not have the overhead light on, and, things like this. So it's those sorts of things that I want more professionals to know about.
Mhm.
And everyone's on a different phase in their journey of being neurodiversity affirming, trauma informed, and people can do better
Mhm.
as well. Kind of no matter where we are, even if we think we know it all and we've got it all together, we don't, because everyone is different, you know.
Mhm.
And so it's really important to check with somebody, like if somebody's coming to see me in person, I describe the setting. I'm like, okay, can you come up a few steps? Do you need to use the ramp in the front? When they get in, I'm like, okay, so I've got my fidget box. Do you want to sit on the floor in a chair? How's the lighting? How's the temperature? Making, like, normalizing that stuff
Yeah.
when we're working with people. And some people won't have an answer to that because they've never been asked.
Mhm.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
they don't know. They don't know that they have a preference
Mhm.
until they think about it,
Yeah.
until they're like, oh, actually, yeah, I can actually hear the buzzing in the light bulb. Could you turn that off?
Mhm.
But if you don't ask that question, people, and again, it depends where the person's at. Some people will be able to go, hey, that's really distracting. Can you turn that off? But for other people, that's a journey they need to go on and a skill they need to learn.
Mhm.
And by you opening that, or demonstrating that, hey, I'm going to use a fidget in session, I'm going to take lots of notes, it doesn't mean I'm not listening. It's how
Mhm.
it helps my working memory. And this is all part of that, showing up authentically as a therapist as well, is that, yeah,
Mhm.
I am going to be taking notes. And yeah, could we sit on the floor because that's really comfortable for me? And like finding a balance between the needs as well, so that, because I also don't want to come off a session totally wiped out because I've been masking.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes.
So there's this, so I do, a new person wants to work with me and we have a half-hour chat before, like, nothing, like, free, no pay, and it's not a discovery call, it's not me selling something, it's me and them going, do we think we could work together?
Mhm.
Mhm.
And sometimes, mostly, that's been a yes.
Mhm.
um but it gives a chance for people to check it out, and to check the fit without having to spend however much money on an initial session to realize that, hey, this actually isn't going to work for me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Giving people that chance, and for me to talk about how I work and what I do, and is that what they're looking for, um, and all of that. I think that's really important as well.
Absolutely. And it provides that space for them to feel like they can say this isn't working, right? That's the purpose of it. It can be really challenging once you have committed to a session to then take that step back. So that's you living authentically too and practicing authentically.
Yeah. Yeah. And understanding, coming from I've had years and years of counseling, therapy, osteo, physio, various health professionals, and again, it's that showing up authentically. It's that how would I want to connect with somebody new?
Yeah.
I've multiple times when I've been looking for a new therapist, a psychologist, or a counselor, I'll ring around. And generally within a 5-minute phone conversation, again, hate phone calls, but we'll do it if I absolutely have to. In a 5-minute phone conversation, I can get a vibe.
Yes. It's the vibe check. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
It's the vibe check.
I don't want to waste 180 or however many dollars having a session with somebody I'm not gonna. And also, if a psychologist isn't willing to do that, we're probably not a good fit.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
So yeah, just giving people the space. And sometimes, if it's a really good fit, that half hour turns into 45 minutes to an hour, and that's okay. But just, giving people that space to, I firmly believe in choice in healthcare. And this is the hard thing with a public system, or when there isn't that choice of providers. And sometimes there's not, because there's limited people, or it's insurance based, or things like that. But as much as possible, that there is a choice in who you're working with and how often, and just all of those things that can help make people more comfortable in talking about things that are sometimes really uncomfortable.
Yeah. I really love what you shared about how you start your sessions and creating that space to check in with themselves and that opportunity to kind of model for them, again, the living authentically. And that's something I try and do as well when I start sessions. I'll often ask, when I first started out with this neurodiversity affirming practice therapy that I'm doing, I was like, how do I start sessions? Because I don't want to immediately place a demand on them. How are you doing? Right? This is like this very neurotypical small talk conversation. So I spend a lot of time figuring out what's a different way I can initiate that. Right. And so I've kind of started consistently saying, like, what are your needs right now and how are your spoons? Or, like, depending on what our language is with that person, it might be resources, it might be spoons, or just checking in on spoons, an opportunity to check in on spoons. And oftentimes, like, they might not have that awareness or that language, and they'll be like, I'm fine. And then it'll be, how are you? Right. And so then I can use that as an opportunity to kind of model and demonstrate, like, thank you for asking. Like, I'm kind of moderate spoon drainage right now, right? I'm feeling a little bit of tightness in my stomach, that dread feelings there a little bit. I got my fidget and I got my water, just like showing up authentically as a neurodivergent self and modeling how they can be checking in with themselves too. It's like every interaction can be therapeutic and can be purposeful,
Yeah.
So.
And starting to model that language as well. It's like, because, sometimes I have clients want to take care of me. And then, it's me reassuring them that, hey, if this was too much, or I needed to pause, or, like, that's on, it's on me to take care of myself, both inside and outside of sessions. That just because I do have lived experience, that doesn't mean that a client needs to look after me. And so I have that conversation too, is that, I do a lot of self-care, self-management outside of sessions in my day-to-day life so that I can show up in sessions, But if I needed to cancel, or even if I was halfway through a session, it would be harder. But even if I was halfway through and I was like, hey, I'm actually not feeling like I can continue this right now. I'm not going to charge you for today. Can we please reschedule? Like, that would be really hard to do, but I want to think that I could still do that.
Yes.
If I was noticing that I wasn't being able to show up authentically and supportively for somebody, that I could call that and be like, actually, I don't have the capacity for this right now. And hopefully I have realized that before I got into a session as well.
Yeah.
And that's part of us checking in with ourselves. It's like, is it okay for me to be at work today? Maybe it's not, or what can I do to make it feel a bit more okay? Sometimes because I wake up very slowly and often not very well, stiff, I feel like I haven't slept at all. But if I can get out in the garden or like get down to some water or like gentle movement or like, sometimes it's doing something creative, reading a book, just like doing some of the things that might reset my system so that I then have the capacity to show up. And it's why, so I don't schedule any sessions before about 1 o'clock for that reason, because I don't wake up well. And it can often take me until about 11 to feel like I'm a human. And so, that's another thing of wanting to be fully in my private practice is I don't want to start work at 9 o'clock. It doesn't serve me. It doesn't serve clients. Like, so that's another freedom of private practice, is that I can go, and a lot of people with chronic illness, it's the same. They take a long time to get going in the morning. So most of my clients don't want a session before 12. And so it's actually perfect. And, because it doesn't, often for ADHD as well, it doesn't work to do things in the morning. Because there's sometimes a delayed phase sleep thing going on or whatever. So, and that's another way that I can set up my own system around my capacity and to not feel shame about that. Like, it's okay that I don't want to start work at 9 a.m. That's actually okay. I don't have to force myself to do that anymore.
No. Yeah. Yeah, I think Stephanie and I, we have both canceled session due to capacity. And I don't know about how you
a lot recently.
Yeah.
A lot.
I don't know how you frame it, but I do try and be transparent about the reason I'm canceling, because I think that's really important to model. Because I want them to be able to do the same. It's easy to say I'm sick or I'm under the weather, right? But I feel like saying I'm not having the capacity for this right now and I need to take care of myself. That's real, right?
And it also shows like you being a good therapist too, saying
I want to be there for you.
Yeah, I want to give you as much as I can for you, and I know that I would not even be giving you 50% of my capacity, and you deserve better as my client. And just having that transparency with them.
And if that doesn't work for them, that's never not worked for them. But if that doesn't work for them, I think that's a beautiful example of why those kind of introductory get to know each other vibe check calls are so important, because then this is probably not the right fit, right? This is what we can provide, and it's going to be authentic, and it's not going to be perfect, and there's going to be typos. And we may have to end a session early, might start a minute late, but like you're gonna get a real person who really genuinely cares about you as another real person. So
and I think I do a lot for myself in how I schedule my week. So I mean, so far I haven't had to cancel anything, which is amazing, being able to be really consistent, but that's a lot of pre-planning. Right? That is, so I do a Monday afternoon and I'm going to be doing a Thursday afternoon. And so I've got days in between and, fun things around that. And it's a scheduling. There's a lot of pre-planning that goes into preventing. Obviously, there's going to be times when I do have to cancel, but, and not trying to have a neurotypical expectation about how many people I can see in a day. As well. Oh my God, I'm in some of these groups and people are seeing 6, 7, 8 people a day. I'm like,
and it's not sustainable.
How? I can see 3, 4 at a push, but 4 I have to have recovery for like 2 or 3 days. 3 is good. 3 is good. I book at least half an hour between each person, so I'm not back to back. I can go to the toilet, have a drink, have a stretch, maybe do a note, depends. But I don't I'm just like, no, why?
Beautiful. Well, speaking of capacity and authenticity, the overhead light, the ring light, and just being the end of the day here for us. I'm running out of spoons.
Yeah.
But this is
Cool.
such a beautiful, wonderful conversation, and I feel so lucky to have gotten to meet you and to hear your story, and just so excited to continue following you and your journey into full-time, what that means for you.
Yeah, I don't want to call it full time because that makes it seem like it's full time hours, but it's like a soul focused private practice.
Focused.
Oh, I like that. Soul focused.
Maybe that's
and soul focused. That's double. I love it.
Yes. Oh, I like that.
Focused.
Delightful.
Yeah. I love conversations like this. And I often connect with people around the world and we just have a cool chat. So it's great that, I can have a cool chat and then it's like, oh my God, it's a podcast. So
that's so true. I know. How exciting. You get to listen to it again and you get to learn about yourself. And it's just like,
I might not. I struggle to listen to myself. So I might not.
Fair enough.
For our listeners though, do you want to give yourself a shout out on how they can find you and stuff?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I should probably do that again. It's like, oh God, how do I promote myself? So on Facebook, I am the Chronically Resilient OT. And I have a website, which is chronicresilienceot.com. So there's a bunch of blogs, worksheets. There's some free stuff as well as paid stuff. So that's all there. I'm not on any other social media because I just can't do more than that. If you want to get in touch with me, please email. I do have messages on Messenger, but I just direct everyone to email because it's just easier to keep it all together. I do have a wait list at the moment. So I'm not necessarily taking new clients, but I am doing those initial chats, and I'm registered in Australia and New Zealand. So for occupational therapy, I can do Australia and New Zealand. And for mentoring, that's kind of anywhere. I do have a client in the States for mentoring. I've also had someone reach out at one point for consultation. So I don't know, if you want some consultation, I can do that too. And just, I'm hopefully going to be doing some more stuff this year. It won't be consistent. It'll be pretty sporadic, but it'll come out. I do have an email list as well. You can sign up to that through the website. I don't email very often. It's maybe once a month if I remember. So I won't spam you if you're on that.
Fair.
So yeah, and I'm just, if you've got a page you want me to follow, please, comment on my stuff on Facebook and I'll probably follow you back. I'm really into that. That sense of that it's not scarcity, that there is room for everybody, and that we can share and be in community and hold each other up, so yeah, I'm really about that as well. And I'm a bigger page apparently, so when I share stuff it helps people. So
for us. Thank you. Yeah.
Appreciated. Much appreciated.
So yeah, just using, the things that I can to support others is, it's really key. And I just, I appreciate this opportunity to have a chat and be authentic and be me and talk about what I love to do. So thank you for agreeing for me to be on here.
Yeah.
Thank you for reaching out.
Yeah. We appreciate the conversations, Rebecca. It's been good. Yeah.
Cool. Well, keep doing your amazing work as well. And it was awesome to connect.
Enjoy your Sunday, and we'll enjoy the rest of our Saturday.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks again, Rebecca.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Neurodivergent Voices.
Interested in an interview? Email divergecs@gmail.com to get it scheduled.